When I was working as a part-time waiter, I saw my girlfriend at someone else's birthday party. I only then discovered that she was a little princess from B City. She always enjoyed criticizing me and despised roses that couldn't meet her standards. But on that very day, at the birthday party, she ordered 999 roses, sending her blessings to that man. Coincidentally, it was also my birthday. I silently watched everything and chose to turn and leave. Later, I blocked all her contact information and left that city. She went crazy. Chapter 1. I met Maria when we were both working part-time in college. It was at a cafe near the university. I saw her at first glance, wearing a white shirt, with delicate features and fair skin. She looked like a poor but beautiful school flower straight out of a novel. After getting to know each other, we became WeChat friends and would study together in the self-study room and work part-time jobs together. Thanks to Maria's stunning appearance, everyone in college knew about the poor school flower at the cafe near the school. People kept adding her on WeChat, and initially, it was fine. But later, it became bothersome, so she decided to push me forward and claim that I was her boyfriend. Caught off guard, I was about to refuse, but I saw a pleading look in Maria's dark eyes. Almost instinctively, I didn't clarify and chose to go along with her words. Eventually, she confessed her feelings to me, and we went from being pretend partners to a real couple. After graduating, we rented a place together. She was an orphan, and my family lived deep in the mountains. We had experienced hardships and valued money more. Living in a big city was expensive, especially for fresh university graduates like us. On our days off, we would take on additional part-time jobs to earn some extra money, contributing to our future marriage fund. When I received this temporary waiter job that paid 200 yuan per hour, I was ecstatic for a long time. But when I saw Maria, who should have been working overtime at her company, appear at the party, the joyful expression on my face instantly froze. Chapter 2. Maria, who has always been frugal, completely changed her modest appearance in front of me. She put on a red strapless gown, and her bangs, which usually covered her eyebrows, were swept up. She looked stunningly beautiful, and if it weren't for that face, I might not have recognized her. At the party, all those wealthy second-generation individuals were vying to please her, and she looked at them with a godlike coldness, observing their obsequious behavior. Seeing me standing there in a daze, Fred, who worked part-time with me, pushed me and asked with concern what was wrong. I shook my head and looked at Maria in the distance, surrounded by a group of people. With a slightly bitter tone, I asked, "Who is she?" Fred glanced over and lowered his voice. "I heard she's the princess of the Smith family in B City." As I looked at the unfamiliar Maria in the distance, indescribable emotions surged within me. My girlfriend, whom I had been with day and night for 4 years, had suddenly transformed from a parentless and pitiful person into the princess of B City. Subconsciously, I took out my phone and sent a text message to Maria. Maria was lazily sitting there, surrounded by a crowd, when her phone suddenly rang. Everyone looked at her and jokingly asked, "Miss Smith, who is it?" Maria picked up her phone, glanced at the screen symbolically, and casually said, "Nothing, just a junk message." Upon hearing this, I felt like I had fallen into an icy abyss, trembling all over. So, in Maria's eyes, I, Alan, was nothing more than an insignificant person. Yes, after being together for 4 years, I didn't even know her true identity. I felt a sense of self-pity for no apparent reason. It seemed like all my efforts had been in vain. I gazed at the lively commotion in the distance, speechless. Sitting next to Maria was a man in a suit. They were flirting and teasing each other, completely disregarding the gazes of others. They were like a loving couple in perfect harmony. Fred brought out the 5-tiered cake that he had been preparing in the kitchen for 5 hours. The cake was covered in fruits, and the creamy and sweet scent could be smelled from afar. People began presenting gifts one after another. Maria was the finale. She waved her hand and had 999 roses sent up. The man was deeply moved and immediately embraced her, kissing passionately. The wealthy second-generation individuals nearby started making a fuss. I and a few others stood there awkwardly, wearing prepared doll costumes and clumsily holding roses. My eyes felt dry, but tears wouldn't come out. I couldn't even describe my current state of mind. Through the doll costume, I looked at Maria as if I were meeting her for the first time. Chapter 3. During the first Valentine's Day when we had just started dating, we went out shopping and saw roses by the roadside. I thought of buying them for her. When I presented the roses to her, I thought she would be happy. But Maria didn't seem pleased. She just raised an eyebrow, with a hint of disdain on her face. What did she say at that time? She said, "Roses don't symbolize love. They're just a market gimmick that brainwashes girls." So tacky. Who still gives roses these days? Seeing that she wasn't too keen on accepting the flowers I bought, I jokingly said, "Tacky? I don't think so. If my baby gave me flowers, I would treasure them. Even if they withered, I would still find them beautiful." She scrunched her eyebrows and retorted, "Who said I would give you roses? You're overthinking it." Before I could even get upset about it, Maria plucked a dandelion from the park lawn and made a crude ring for me. I was deeply moved at that moment, and I regretted my own impulsiveness. Now, looking at the scene before me, I can't help but feel how silly I was back then. She never thought giving roses was tacky. Perhaps she just didn't want to give me roses. Chapter 4. The party was lively, but it didn't belong to me. I just quietly watched them until the party ended and I collected my paycheck before leaving. By the time I returned to the rental house, it was already early morning, and Maria wasn't home. Exhausted, I slumped on the couch, realizing it was also my birthday today. I had planned to finish my part-time job and use the money I earned to buy myself a cake and a small gift. Perhaps it was because I was so out of it on the way back, I didn't make any extra stops and went straight home. As I looked at the decoration and layout before me, all accumulated over the years we lived together, I remembered how we had even made a pact to buy this house when we earned enough money. So, I worked hard and saved diligently. Even on my birthday, when I saw a part-time job paying $200 per hour, I still went for it. What else could I do if I didn't go? If I didn't go, would I keep deceiving myself by not knowing the truth? I hugged myself on the couch, not knowing how much time had passed, until I heard the sound of the door opening. Maria had returned. She had changed out of her glamorous dress from the party and put on her usual old clothes, transforming from the dazzling princess of the bustling city into an ordinary white-collar worker. I looked at her, but didn't say a word. Maria changed her clothes and came over, embracing me directly. I gently pushed her away from the embrace and saw the fatigue on her face. I asked, "Why didn't you reply to my messages?" Maria's expression froze for a moment, then returned to normal. "Baby, I'm sorry. I didn't see them. You don't know how busy the overtime was today." She looked a bit wronged. If I hadn't seen her being the center of attention at that party, I might have been fooled by her acting. "But do you remember?" My voice was dry as I slowly spoke, "Today is my birthday." Initially, I thought her excuse of working overtime was genuine. Maybe after finishing work, she would surprise me. We had been together for 4 years, and she had been there for my birthday during the first 3 years. Now, it seemed she had simply forgotten. Perhaps she had grown tired of it. She forgot my birthday, her official boyfriend, and went to celebrate someone else's birthday, casually throwing around 999 roses that she had never given me. I felt a lump forming in my throat, a desire to cry, but I held it back. Maria clearly had forgotten. She apologized with a furrowed brow and promised to make it up to me with a gift tomorrow. I didn't respond to her. She thought I was just sulking because of the lack of a gift, so she made a token effort to appease me and went to sleep. I quietly watched her, her sleeping face, a face I had sketched countless times, suddenly felt so unfamiliar. We used to argue and break up before, but it was always because of a temper tantrum. This time was different. "Maria, this time, I truly don't want you anymore." Chapter 5. I submitted my resignation letter to the company. Without telling Maria, I booked a ticket to Z City. As I left, I looked back at this city. It was the dream I had since I met Maria. Back then, I naively believed that I could spend my whole life with Maria, hoping to have a home with her in this big city. But in reality, it was always just my own dream. Now, the dream has ended. I pulled my suitcase and turned to board the train. On the train, I looked at Maria's profile picture and, almost involuntarily, sent her a message. Then I proceeded to block all of her contact information. Maria, the game of pretending to be poor ends here. Chapter 6. Reality is not like a movie. No one will waste 2 or 3 years feeling down because of a failed relationship, including me. Time keeps moving forward, and I have sorted out my mindset and started searching for a new job by sending out resumes. As a bachelor's degree holder in this era where university graduates are everywhere, I don't have much of a competitive advantage. Every day, it's a repetitive cycle of sending resumes, going for interviews, sending resumes, and going for interviews. But luckily, during the years I was with Maria, I saved up some money in order to have a home. Being temporarily unemployed wouldn't put me in a dire situation. With the busy hustle and bustle of working day and night, I didn't have much time to dwell on Maria. Soon enough, I landed a job and finally settled down. Every day, it's just work in my rented apartment, living a peaceful life on my own. I naively thought that the world is big, and once I left that city, Maria and I would have no chance of being together again. Fate might be orchestrating a ridiculous performance because just when I was reporting for work, I saw Maria once more. And there she was, sitting in the chair of the new manager's office. After not seeing each other for a few months, she had returned to her role as the princess of B City, dressed in a tailored suit, resembling the Maria from that night. Indeed, she was never the so-called poor girl Maria. I looked at the newly appointed manager in front of me, pretending not to know Maria, and professionally handed her the documents. As I was about to leave her office, someone forcefully grabbed my hand. I followed the hands to see who it was. Maria. She pulled me into her office. Chapter 7. English. There was no one else in the office, and Maria stood in front of me. Even though she had a blank expression, I could sense her anger. Why? Maria's dark eyes stared at me, filled with frustration. I simply looked at her, not responding. It felt like a compromise, yet also a resignation. Maria lowered her head, like she was dealing with an angry cat. Can we stop this nonsense? It's my fault. Stop this nonsense? With just a few words, she blamed everything on me being unreasonable. I chuckled in anger. Who would dare blame you, Miss Smith? Maria heard it, and her hand, which was about to reach out, froze. Then, it gently landed on my head, as if comforting a small cat. Her tone was calm. Just because of this? Don't be angry, okay? Let's go eat. Casually brushing off the matter. Not even an explanation or an apology. She still thought I was the obedient lapdog who would do anything for her. What about your roses? I stubbornly looked at Maria, trying to get an answer from her. Her face remained calm. Just a childhood friend. On your birthday, you received 999 roses. And you call that a childhood friend? Maria explained, it was his birthday that day. Throughout this confrontation, Maria remained calm as a spectator. I felt a pang in my nose. Maria, do you remember? During the years we were together, on my birthday and on Valentine's Day, you said I didn't deserve roses from you. All these years, I deliberately forgot Maria's words, subconsciously convincing myself that I didn't like roses. But, who doesn't like it when their lover gives them flowers on special occasions? Do you like roses? I can have them sent right now. I looked at Maria's serious face. Even at this moment, Maria didn't understand her mistake. Maria, perhaps I was wrong from the beginning. You don't love me. I shook off her hand and pushed open the door, walking away. Just as I reached for the doorknob, Maria's voice came from behind. Alan, my patience is limited. I've already explained to you, what else do you want from me? I opened the door. If you dare to leave this room, I won't go back to appease you. This is the end between us. Maria warned me, using this relationship as a warning. Manager Smith, the delivery has arrived. I apologize, but I still have work to do. I didn't hesitate, turning around and leaving. How did I not see it all these years? Clearly, many times, Maria made it clear that she didn't love me. Every time we argued, I was always the first to back down. Perhaps it was this favoritism that made Maria feel invincible. This was the first time Maria bowed to me. Perhaps she couldn't believe that I would humiliate her like this. She even thought that, just like before, I loved her and couldn't live without her. Trying to force me into submission with these tactics. But the truth is, Maria, you were wrong. Chapter 8. I silently worked at my own position. But just like misfortunes never come alone, my previously harmonious colleagues started targeting me. Project proposals were constantly rejected and had to be redone. Every time we finished work, they would specifically call me out to stay behind. They chatted amongst themselves, but fell silent when they saw me. I knew all of this was intentional on Maria's part. After being together for 4 years, I knew her personality the best. She may seem aloof, but she holds grudges. However, these tactics were previously used on others, and now they were being used on me. At night, as if it were a habit, I was left to work overtime. In the vast office, I was the only one left. When I'm alone, I tend to daydream. It reminded me of the way I first met Maria. Perhaps it was the freshness of it all. When we first got together, we loved being close to each other. Our favorite thing was going on dates to the library every day. I would explain those assignments to Maria over and over again. Sometimes, when she caught me spacing out, I would playfully tap her head with a pen, and then continue explaining with a blush on my cheeks. Maybe it was the novelty, or maybe at some point, Maria genuinely loved me. However, at this moment, I no longer want to delve into it. Deception is deception. No matter how well you wrap it in lies, you can't change its essence. Chapter 9. Perhaps due to the intense overtime in recent days, I sat wearily in front of the computer. The work on my hands was not yet finished when Manager Lou from the department called me into his office for a routine lecture. It was nothing more than some trivial words. As I looked at the middle-aged man with receding hairline and his fierce expression, I suddenly remembered how he groveled before Maria. It struck me as funny. I was well aware that everything in front of me was just an attempt to please Maria. Manager Lou's facial muscles twitched dramatically as he pointed his finger at me and launched into a furious tirade. Before I could react, a cup of hot coffee was poured over my head. The neatly combed hair I had styled in the morning was now drenched in thick coffee. The scorching liquid streamed down my face and onto my clothes. I was a complete mess. The door behind me opened, and Maria happened to walk in, accompanied by the man from the birthday banquet. With coffee all over my head, face, and clothes, I felt a wave of embarrassment wash over me. Maria glanced at me briefly, then shifted her gaze towards Manager Lou. The previously arrogant Manager Lou stood up from his chair and nodded deferentially to Maria. Maria kindly gestured for the man behind her to sit, then proceeded to discuss work matters with Manager Lou. I stood there in silence, as if there were only 3 people in this office. The man seemed to know who I was, and he looked at me with a provocative smile. He then took out a pack of tissues from his bag and handed them to me. I stood frozen in place, not reaching out to take them. After Maria finished her conversation with Manager Lou, she looked at me with a tone that carried a hint of warning. If you don't want to do it, quit if you don't have the capability. In that moment, I felt an overwhelming sense of suffocation. She clearly knew that all of this was her doing, and Manager Lou was simply trying to please her. Feeling incredibly wronged, tears welled up in my eyes. Perhaps for the sake of dignity, I struggled to hold them back from falling. As I walked out of the office, my emotions gradually stabilized. The cup of hot coffee had awakened me. I decided to resign. The resignation process was swift, and the next day I packed up my belongings from my workstation and left the company. Having quit my job twice in less than 6 months, I decided to take a break, give myself some rest, and properly adjust my emotions. Chapter 10. Just as I was trying to escape reality and enjoy some hot pot with friends while shopping, Maria appeared. Her expression darkened, and her face turned cold when she saw the person beside me. She interrogated me, "Who is she?" At that moment, my friend went back to retrieve something he had forgotten at the hot pot restaurant, and I stayed here with his younger sister, who was studying at the university. Maria's arrogant tone made me extremely uncomfortable. Instead of answering her question, I chose to retort, "Who is she to you?" "Alan, what are you still playing at?" Maria maintained her arrogant stance. "I'm sorry, I don't think he wants to talk to you anymore." Ruth, my friend's sister, stood in front of me. Maria looked at the younger woman in front of her, and veins popped on her temples. With a cold face, she said, "I am his boss, and I don't think you have the authority to stop me from talking to him." "Maria, I've already resigned. You're not my superior, and I don't want to talk to you about anything." I shattered her illusion. Maria went mad, bloodshot eyes making her look like an enraged lion. "Alan, as long as I haven't agreed to your resignation, you're still an employee of the company." Ruth laughed and looked at the furious and helpless woman in front of her. "Miss Smith, I don't think you've ever read a book and know nothing about the law." It sounded like mockery, yet also like sarcasm. Before Ruth could finish her sentence, Maria's slap came flying towards her. Caught off guard, Ruth only managed to turn her head, and the slap grazed her cheek. Clearly, Maria had used all her strength, leaving a red mark on Ruth's face. After realizing what had happened, the 20-year-old girl, filled with anger, had the initial instinct to fight back but thought of the person behind her. She restrained her anger and covered her face with her hand. Seeing this scene, I walked up directly and checked Ruth's cheek. "Are you okay? What happened to your face?" Ruth covered her face, and when she looked at me, her eyes were red, as if she had been bullied. Seeing that she wasn't seriously hurt, I felt a surge of guilt. Today, my friend brought his sister, who was studying at Z University, to accompany me shopping because of me. She ended up getting hurt. The guilt overwhelmed me. Looking at Maria, I couldn't help but express some resentment. "Maria, I think there's nothing left to say between us. We broke up a long time ago, and from now on, we go our separate ways. If you ever come to bother me again, I will report it as harassment." Maria watched the unfolding scene in a daze, her eyes fixed on Ruth, her hand clenched tightly into a fist, even thinking of crossing Ruth to grab my hand. But Ruth was quick and didn't let her succeed. Realizing that she was losing, Maria softened her tone helplessly. "Alan, can we sit down and talk about our situation?" At this moment, Maria no longer had her previous arrogance. She looked at me with anticipation. I just averted my gaze and calmly replied, "There's nothing to talk about between us." After saying that, I took Ruth and left. Maria stood there, dejected, her eyes fixed on the departing figures, her hand hanging limply, clenched into a fist. Chapter 11. After that incident, to thank Ruth, I said I would treat her to a meal. Ruth gladly accepted. Just as I was treating her to a meal, Maria appeared again, unwilling to give up. I looked at Maria, who was drenched from head to toe, with rainwater dripping from her disheveled hair. She looked like she had been abandoned, wearing a look of grievance on her face, and her eyes filled with hurt. "Alan, I know I was wrong. I was just too angry before, that's why I reacted like that." Even now, Maria was still trying to justify herself. I didn't listen to her so-called explanation, I just warned her, "Maria, I don't want to hear your so-called explanations. We have no relationship now. I told you last time, if you appear in front of me again, I will choose to involve the police. So, do you choose to leave on your own, or should I make you leave?" Maria seemed like she wanted to say something more. "Brother, are you okay? The meat is cooked." Ruth appeared, seeing Maria, a perfectly surprised expression on her face. Ruth's previously neatly groomed hair was a bit messy now, as if she had just gotten out of bed. Being clever, I chose not to expose her. Maria clearly didn't expect Ruth to be here. She looked at Ruth with hostility and questioned, "Why is she here?" Ruth sounded confused and naturally replied, "If I'm not mistaken, I'm not here for my brother." "Could it be that it's you, his ex-girlfriend, who was here?" The emphasis on the words ex-girlfriend made Maria's face immediately turn ugly. Especially seeing Ruth in this state, it was clear that she had misunderstood. "Alan, you said before that you love me." "Yes, I did say that I loved her, that we would be together, get married, have children. But it was just my wishful thinking. Maria has always been arrogant and in control in this relationship. This is the first time that things have gone beyond her control. Maria's words sounded ridiculous in my ears. From the beginning, it was her who deceived me, who brushed me off, who intentionally tormented me. Now she's trying to play the victim? That's too good to be true. I looked at Ruth. Seeing the situation, Ruth tactfully pretended to have something to attend to and playfully winked at me, saying, "Brother, let me know if you need anything." Now it was just Maria and me. Maria, seeing Ruth leave, thought there was hope, her eyes filled with a hint of anticipation. But before she could say anything, I interrupted her, saying, "Maria, don't you think you're despicable? When you question me, did you ever think about yourself? Did you ever consider your own actions? From the beginning of our acquaintance, your lies and deceit, and when everything was exposed, you just casually brushed it off without any explanation. I'm curious, what about your so-called love for me?" Maria was about to defend herself, but I didn't give her a chance, choosing to continue speaking. "Maria, do you think that by coming back to me now, your love is so great that it will change my mind? Do you think that I will still revolve around you like before, that I can't live without you? How ridiculous, Maria. Let me make it clear to you right now. It's impossible between us. Since we reunited and you casually brushed off years of deception with a single sentence, we can never go back." Maria grabbed my hand, her eyes red as she looked at me. "Alan, listen to me. I love you. I just. Just what?" I coldly looked at her disheveled and helpless state. "You just don't love me, you just wanted to play with me? Admit it, Maria, you don't love me. You only love yourself. And now you're trying to hold on to me because you can't accept it." Like a cat with its tail stepped on, Maria became frantic. She tried to show me her so-called love, using a bunch of useless words to justify herself. I didn't want to get entangled with her any longer. I just wanted her to leave as soon as possible. Without waiting for her to say anything, I closed the door and went back into the room. Chapter 12. Leo was my roommate in high school and college. He witnessed my relationship with Maria from our university days to our lives after graduation. When he saw me, his eyes were filled with curiosity as he asked, "So, how did it go?" I was a bit confused and sat back at my seat, asking, "What do you mean?" Leo continued probing, "I mean, you and Maria. We broke up, what else?" I replied. Perhaps seeing Maria's true colors, the heaviness I usually felt when it came to breakups was no longer there. It felt like I had finally let go of a heavy burden and could breathe again. Leo, getting excited, asked, "You really broke up? You won't give in and get back together with her?" I looked at him, his skeptical gaze making me understand. After all, every time Maria and I broke up, it was always me who went back begging for reconciliation. Leo teased me, saying I had a love-struck mind. I assured Leo in a serious tone that this time, Maria and I had truly broken up, and there would be no more entanglements. Leo was initially shocked, probably caught off guard, but then he looked at me with excitement, as if he had witnessed something incredible. He chuckled, and his mischievous look made me feel a bit uneasy. I picked up a piece of meat from my plate and said, "What mischief are you planning?" Leo felt a little embarrassed and hesitantly asked, "Alan, what do you think of my sister Ruth?" I glanced at Ruth next to me, who was lowering her head to put meatballs into the hot pot. She lovingly picked up some cooked meat and put it into Leo's and my bowls, showing a special tenderness. "She's beautiful, ambitious, gentle, a really great girl." I genuinely expressed my thoughts. Upon hearing my evaluation, Leo's tone became cautious. "Well, Alan, maybe you should." I instantly caught on and quickly interrupted him. Seeing Ruth, who had been sitting beside us, enter the kitchen, I felt relieved and then glared fiercely at her brother. "Are you bad-mouthing me again?" Leo looked at me with a smile. "I'm just trying to help you heal your wounds from love." I quickly stopped him. "Enough. She and I aren't compatible. Besides, she's too young. I only see her as a sister. I'm not interested." Leo, seeing my determination, gave up. Alright, well, it's a shame that the girl has been secretly in love with you for so many years. I was shocked, and water sprayed out of my mouth. She? In love with me? Yeah. Otherwise, why do you think she used to come to pick me up in high school? It was all to see you. I looked at Ruth coming out of the kitchen and gestured to Leo to stop talking. Let's just let this matter pass. Chapter 13. After finishing the hot pot, Leo and I cleaned up the mess together, and then we started chatting. Ruth sat quietly on the couch, playing with her phone and occasionally saying a few words to me. As evening approached, perhaps because Leo and I hadn't spent much time together, Leo decided to stay overnight and continue our chat. Ruth went back to her dormitory by herself. Leo went to take a shower, and I walked Ruth out as she was leaving. Just as I was about to say goodbye to her and lock the door to go back to my room, Ruth extended her fair arm and closed the door, using her body to pin me against the door, trapping me in the small space between her and the door. With her height of 1.6 meters, she stood on her tiptoes, her clear eyes looking at me. The usually pretty and delicate girl gathered her courage. Brother, I'm not a kid anymore. I'm already an adult. After saying these words, Ruth's ears turned red, and her eyes were full of seriousness and stubbornness. I recalled Leo's words, that little girl has secretly loved you for many years, and looking at the earnest person in front of me, I felt a bit at a loss. I didn't know how to respond, and I admit that for a moment, I felt moved. Before I could say anything, Ruth, afraid of hearing a rejection in person, said, "See you tomorrow," and then fled in a hurry. Chapter 14. After Ruth almost confessed that night, it seemed like she had unleashed her hidden feelings. Every day, she would intentionally or unintentionally bring up topics to chat about, and we would bump into each other from time to time. I looked at Ruth, who was once again following behind me, and wondered how many times it had happened this month. I rubbed my temples and asked, "Don't you have classes? Why do you follow me every day?" Ruth innocently opened her clear eyes and seemed to complain, "Brother, don't you know? It's summer vacation now." I slapped my forehead. It must be because I've been working for a long time and have forgotten that students have summer and winter vacations, except for holidays and weekends. She's my childhood friend's younger sister, someone I've watched grow up since high school. I didn't outright reject her, but I gently suggested that as a university student, she should spend her summer vacation doing meaningful things to make it more fulfilling. The underlying message was for her not to follow me. Perhaps due to the emotional pain from my previous relationship, I wasn't ready to enter into a new one. The withdrawal symptoms of an ended relationship don't just disappear overnight. Furthermore, Ruth is not just a friend's sister, she's someone I've known since high school. I don't want to hurt her. But Ruth seems to be oblivious to the unspoken words and acts as if she doesn't understand. I discussed this with Leo, thinking that as my brother, he would know how to handle it. To my surprise, Leo seemed completely indifferent and even gossiped about me and Ruth. Chapter 15. Just when I thought Ruth would finally calm down and return to school after the national school reopening in September, she rented a room right across from mine. I opened the door and saw Ruth, smiling at me and saying, "Brother, what a coincidence." Me? ? Is this really a coincidence? The truth is, Ruth is like a clingy ghost that I can't shake off. Even when I clearly expressed my rejection to her, she would take a step back whenever I became impatient. But over time, she would slowly inch closer again. It's a never-ending cycle. This situation leaves me helpless. However, the only good thing about Ruth moving across from my place is that I now have a chef I can mooch meals off of. Since my culinary skills are nothing to brag about, it's not like the food is amazing, but it's edible. Maria is also a kitchen novice, so most of the time, the two of us compromise and cook together. As for Ruth's cooking skills, I seriously suspect she graduated from some culinary institution. Every time I swear not to go over to Ruth's place for meals, I can't resist the enticing aroma of her dishes wafting from next door, and I find myself unable to resist the temptation to go over. Chapter 16. In the midst of this mooching meals neighborly relationship, my bond with Ruth grew closer day by day. As time passed, my feelings for Maria became like a wound slowly healing and forming a scar. I even rarely thought about those past memories anymore. I updated my resume, found a job, and started living my life properly. After work, Ruth would wait for me every day, and it gradually progressed to her picking me up from work. At first, I told her not to come, but she insisted. And so, our relationship remained above friendship but below being lovers. Ruth never brought it up, she just treated me well, afraid of pressuring me by confessing her feelings. Until one day, on the way home from work, I encountered Ruth being harassed by some drunken thugs. I directly stepped forward and punched the thugs several times. After settling the matter at the police station, it was finally over. Ruth's face showed the fear she experienced during the incident, her pretty face pale. She helped me apply some medicine. Ruth looked at me with focused eyes. Just as I moved my hand away, Ruth grabbed hold of it and confessed her feelings to me. She said she was scared and didn't know what she would do without my protection. Her eyes were moist as she looked at me, and my instinct to protect reached its peak in that moment. I admit that my heart was moved, so I agreed. Ruth hugged me and kept smiling like a silly girl from a well-to-do family. Chapter 17. I saw Maria again at a class reunion. She, who always cared about her image, now looked completely disheveled. At the reunion, she sat alone on the couch, drinking excessively, completely devoid of her former confidence. According to our university classmates, Maria's family company was going downhill, but Maria herself was not able to bounce back. The Smith family saw her condition and started preparing to groom a new successor. After the class reunion ended, I waited at the door for Ruth to pick me up. Maria, reeking of alcohol, walked towards me. Just as she was about to say something, Ruth's car arrived. Maria froze in place, looking at me with a pained expression. "Are you with her now?" I got into the passenger seat of Ruth's car and looked at Maria standing by the roadside. I spoke to her as if talking to an ordinary friend, saying, "Maria, the past is already behind us, and what needs to be let go should be let go. I wish you happiness in the future." Ruth helped me fasten my seatbelt and started the car. In the rearview mirror, I saw Maria covering her face, crouching down in helpless remorse, crying. Unfortunately, there is no medicine for regret in this world.